The wrongly excommunicated, and yes, I said wrongly, Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, who said some hot takes that were, strictly speaking, according to Aquinas and St. Vincent of Lerins and other things, perfectly within his right to say to his ecclesiastical superiors if they had gone off the deep end and started embracing heresy and other evils. Go read Aquinas, it's there. St. Vincent of Lerins, it's pretty clear what he thinks of this stuff. And yet he was excommunicated for it, claiming he had incurred a latentiae sententia excommunication, automatic excommunication, only needing to be declared as such after an investigation by the Holy See, which of course they did. Now, I don't need to point out to you how many figures in the modern post-conciliar church have incurred such excommunications for pretty heinous deeds, and yet it's almost never enforced. They did so with Vigano because, well, for political reasons, we'll call it. That having been said, I don't think it was just, and quite frankly, I think history will find him vindicated and his name will be cleared eventually. Probably not while he still walks the earth, unfortunately, because Leo will probably be on the throne of Peter long after Vigano has gone to his personal judgment. But only the Lord knows such things himself. And we will leave all those kind of considerations up to the province of God. However, on his own website, Exsurge Domine, Archbishop Vigano posts his letters these days, and sometimes they get picked up by the media, but you may have noticed not many Catholic commentators and print outlets really talk about Vigano much anymore. Because, of course, he says some pretty spicy things, and, well, he's become very controversial. But he issued this statement regarding the scandalous doctrinal note Mater Populi Fidelis. It has become in vogue for some Catholics to say, well, the document upholds the church's teaching on these things. It just says it's too complicated for those silly Catholics to understand and to be able to defend properly, and it's too complicated so that it causes scandal with Protestants, so we shouldn't use the term. If you actually read the document carefully, you will find there's heresy there. There is. Said this numerous times already, but if you want to see a good take on it, the Padre Peregrino podcast, Father Dave Nix interviewed or had a conversation with Father Isaac Marie Relia on this, and it's pretty eye-opening. You should go check that out, see their argument if you're not convinced. But here's Archbishop Vigano on this entire question, and it's a hot take, and we'll just go right to it before we move on to a similar letter from another source. Now, as is the usual with Vigano letters, we do have to be careful with some of the things he says here. For those who get annoyed when I swap words out, this place is not a free speech platform. Thought you should know that. The doctrinal note, presented in the past few days at the Vatican, with only its Latin incipit Mater Populi Fidelis, constitutes yet another scandalous affront from a treacherous and deviant hierarchy, which for over 60 years, in an unstoppable crescendo, has used its authority to speciously impose its own doctrinal and moral deviations on Catholics, with the aim of dismantling the Catholic Church and losing souls. The haste, one might almost say the fury, to destroy is such that it also highlights the contradictions existing within the synodal body itself. Afflicted by a significant pathological bipolarism, on the one hand, it declares the Marian title of co-redemptrix attributed to the Virgin Mary to be improper, and on the other, it promotes John Henry Newman to Doctor Ecclesia, Doctor of the Church, who had defended that title against the Anglicans after their attack on the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. And the indignation and sense of outrage that pervades every Catholic at the denigration of the Blessed Virgin makes it difficult to master the holy anger that seizes the faithful upon hearing the Mother of God vilified. But it is precisely in those moments in which the enemy provokes us, hoping to obtain an over-the-top reaction from us, that we must maintain the utmost clarity of judgment. Precisely when analyzing and weighing the significance of certain assertions, it is essential to remember that all the statements and actions of the officials of the Synodal Church are specious and deceptive. They're intended to lead us to follow the adversary onto the terrain where he wishes to wage war. But that is precisely the place we must absolutely not allow ourselves to be lured, lest we fall into the trap these heretics have cunningly set for us. Let's be blunt. Tuco Fernandez cares nothing about the co-redemption, much less about the potential misunderstandings of the faithful. And it would be pathetic to think that he is supposedly reaffirming the sole mediation of our Lord, while both his employers, Bergoglio and Prevost, maintain that all religions lead to God. Tuco Fernandez does not have the slightest concern about the spread of doctrinal errors that the dicastery he unworthily presides over should promptly condemn, errors which he deliberately fuels. No one is concerned about the possible doctrinal misunderstandings when an attempt was made to pass off the filthy idol of Pachamama as an image of the Virgin Mary carrying the Lord in her womb, after the faithful were outraged and scandalized by the worship of a hideous pagan image by Bergoglio and his associates. Confusion and contradiction are the hallmark of the synodal church, its trademark, so to speak. It is an accepting contradiction that the faithful must abdicate their reason and the sensus fide, as the professio apostase demands of the follower. Tuco Fernandez has the spiritual sensitivity of a hoe and the erudition of an IKEA assembly manual. Furthermore, he's too busy making people forget his obscene pamphlets after having staged that shameful show trial for schism against me and signed the decree of my excommunication. His priorities are not those of a pastor consumed by zeal for the glory of God and the salvation of souls, but of a cynical bureaucrat without faith, appointed with the task of demoting the role, prestige, credibility, authority of that supreme and sacred and universal congregation of the Holy Office that Montini had already downgraded to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and which Bergoglio then further renamed as a dicastery. If Tuco promulgated this note, he did so for other purposes, and it is on this that we must focus if we wish to understand the heretical nature and destructive scope of his subversive work. Let us not forget that this document had been in preparation since the time of Bergoglio, and that it was published after the homily given on October 26th by Prevost on the occasion of the Jubilee pilgrimage of the synodal team's participatory bodies, with a link to it there. And now he quotes Pope Leo. Upon all of us and the church spread throughout the world, I invoke the intercession of the Virgin Mary with the words of the servant of God, Don Tonino Bello. Holy Mary, woman of conviviality, nourish in our churches the desire for communion. Help them to overcome internal divisions. Intervene when the demon of discord creeps into their midst. Extinguish the fires of factionalism. Reconcile mutual disputes. Diffuse their rivalries. Stop them when they decide to go their own way, neglecting convergence on common grounds. End quote. It is not superfluous to recall exactly who this Don Tonino Bello was, the Bishop of Molfetta, a heretic and subtly perverse and perverting figure as only modernists can be. In the irreverent pamphlet cited by Leo, the Bishop Tonino Bello, he wrote, quote, "We want to imagine her, Mary, as an adolescent, while on summer afternoons she comes up from the beach, in Bermuda shorts, dark with sun and beauty, carrying in her clear eyes a fragment of the green Adriatic." End quote. And I'm going to pause here. At Mass today, do an act of reparation for that, for that bishop saying that. That's just grotesque. That's an attack on Our Lady's modesty, to put it mildly. And there's also some notes of impurity there. All right, anyway. It is therefore not only Tuco Fernandez who must be blamed for this abominable note, but the entire Vatican establishment and its leaders. An establishment that, while extolling the infinite dignity of man in rebellion against God, does not hesitate to humiliate the dignity of the woman enveloped in light. And this has been true not just since today or yesterday, but for 60 years. That is, since the clique that had just succeeded in rejecting the preparatory schemas of the Second Vatican Council had also ensured that the proclamation of the dogma of the co-redemption of Mary Most Holy, expected by a large portion of the world episcopate, was also annulled and judged not very ecumenical with regard to Protestant dissidents. And if Tuco Fernandez has reached the point of challenging a theological term that is mentioned innumerable times in the papal documents of Pius IX, Leo XIII, St. Pius X, Benedict XV, Pius XI, and Pius XII, it is not out of concern for the faithful or to avoid equivocal formulations of doctrine, but out of genuine hatred for the Mother of God. It is the hand of Satan that penned those hateful words. It is the icy breath of eternal damnation that inspired them. There is nothing good in them, not even the intention, which is specious and serves another purpose. First and foremost, to accustom us to the idea that every Catholic doctrine can be subject to change, that what was true yesterday is no longer true today, that the faith that brought souls to heaven up until Pius XII could now have become a source of confusion or even heresy. Thus, while Prevost and Tuco Fernandez pretend to want to dispel the misunderstandings of a doctrine confirmed by the simple faith of the people, they are simultaneously preparing to give theological consistency to James Martin activities, or synodal activities if you prefer, the female diaconate, and the subversion of the papacy in a synodal key. Tout va très bien, Madame le Marquis. Everything is fine, Madame le Marquis, so long as no one denounces their impostures and, of course, recognizes their authority. We don't need to analyze this document to grasp its perverse nature. Just look into the eyes of those who propose it to us. The empty, deaf, gloomy, and loveless stare of lost souls. The stare of those who, instead of bowing reverently before the Virgin Mother of God, have nothing else to do but exploit her for immigration propaganda, invoking her as the solatium migrantium, and stripping her of the titles that the Holy Catholic Church recognizes, and by which the faithful people venerate her and obtain the graces of which she is the munificent dispenser. Among these graces, the one we ardently invoke will not fail to be granted. That is, that she who alone defeats all heresies and tramples on the proud head of the infernal dragon may hasten the triumph of her Immaculate Heart. Issued by Carlo Maria Vigano, Archbishop, on the 7th of November, 2025. I think he was holding back in that letter. Oh, it's got a very angry tone. You can't read that without feeling it. I still think he was holding back. That was, I think, a more charitable version of Archbishop Vigano than we've seen in some other letters. I know that may shock some of you, given what he said, but I've seen him go after these men in harder ways. So perhaps he's trying to rein it in a little bit with that. But that was still, I think, a magnificent letter. I'm very curious what you all have to say. As Sandra says, no more than ever, we have to do the first 5 Saturdays to make reparation to the offenses done to our mother in heaven. December 6th will be the last one of the year. There's no question in the chat about what I think of other podcasters. I don't talk about other podcasters unless I have a good reason to. And I've covered that story, and I will have a clipping of it for you tomorrow if you haven't seen it. Beyond that, I don't talk about the Polaris by now. This is a channel for Catholics, not for modernists. Anyway, speaking of this, Vigano talked about how they've been preparing the faithful for new and perverse teachings on all sorts of manner of evil, including the James Martin stuff. Well, out of a place we have to cover all too often on this channel, we have a good example of this being normalized in the church, these evils that come from the mouth of James Martin and the organizations he's allied with. And even the good pastors there are too afraid to stand up for the Catholic faith in defense of things, to save souls, because they know what the environment is like now, ecclesiastically, where the bishops are. Estimated that 80% potentially of the bishops are of like mind and like inclination to James Martin. I think that number might be a little high, but it's certainly at least 50%. You can tell by how they handle these issues. No right-minded and right-oriented person would applaud like seals whenever the topic of the types of people James Martin has a weird interest in comes up, and the outcome of the discussion is always let's loosen things up and unfetter their access to the sacraments without repentance. Like, it always happens. And whenever the bishops get a chance to vote on these things, it's always at least 80% who support it, to radically changing the church's teachings and practice on these things while paying lip service to the same teachings. And here's an example of what happens when theory meets practice Go to katholisch.de. This is the official news arm of the German Bishops' Conference. And I say every time I post this, and I'll say it again here, whenever the bishops of Germany post something on this website, unless there's a disclaimer, this is their endorsement of it. Headline: Pastor married 4 dudes. Bishop distances himself. Oh, bishop distances himself. You'll notice the bishop didn't enforce, didn't take a firm stand. No, he distanced himself. Welcome to the Synodal Church, where you'll get a kind of tacit acknowledgement by the bishops of here, Germany, that, well, he's maybe going a couple inches too far on this topic. And the bishop just distanced himself. The church, not even in Amoris Laetitia or Fiducia supplicans, has authorized such quote-unquote matrimonial services for people of that kind. In the document, Fiducia supplicans, it opens with a pretty fair reminder of the reality of the sacrament and its limitations. It's just the rest of the document goes on to say we don't care so much about that because in practice we're going to ignore what the church teaches. That's why it's an evil document. Acknowledging the truth while then saying, but the truth doesn't matter. Pastoral sensitivity matters more. And then going on to create a situation where it was inevitable this was going to happen. And it has finally happened. Here are the details from this article. Pray on this at Mass. Go ahead. I'm calling now for active reparations practically. Seems like in every video I do these days. Berlin Bishop Christian Stablin has distanced himself from the blessing of 4 dudes by a Kreuzberg pastor, which was presented as a wedding ceremony. The Evangelical Church of Berlin Brandenburg Schlesien Upper Lusitatia only performs wedding ceremonies for couples who have already been legally married. Allegations of polygamy in this context are baseless and unfounded. And why am I bringing this up on here when it's the Catholic bishop in the Evangelical Church? Because they are so closely aligned. They're like this in Germany. Luther won in Germany. Stablin declared on Friday, Pastor Lena Mueller, I'm sure you're shocked that a lady pastor, a pastorette, did this, had publicly announced on her Instagram account that she had married 4 dudes to each other in a poly wedding ceremony this summer. The church explained that weddings and marriage ceremonies are forms that bless 2 people through God. Provost Christina Maria Brommel also emphasized that Protestant weddings bless, quote, the marriage of 2 loving people. The ceremony was a small church service held as part of a pop-up wedding festival organized by the regional church. The pastor explained in an interview with the Ostfriesen Zeitung. The 4 men had known each other for some time, but they came together in this polyamorous arrangement this year. And the bishop, the local bishop, whose job it is to restore sanity whenever weird stuff like this happens, to denounce these things, couldn't bring himself to do it. On to this story. Diane asks a very pertinent question here. I never understood why any Catholic would care one bit what a Protestant thinks about Catholicism. Who cares? I just always thought of them as those that walked away from Jesus, pick and choose. Well, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say they walked away from Jesus, but I know our forebears in the faith would have said that, especially in the hierarchy. I will say this much. I've said this before. Why does the Catholic Church care what people who are not Catholic think about us? Why is the Catholic Church, its leaders, aligning themselves with non-Catholic figures, non-Catholic religions? Even now, the Catholic Church still refrains from joining the World Council of Churches. 100 years ago, the popes condemned that organization. And still the church doesn't join the organization, but now has observers there and acts like it's a member of it. The World Council of Churches is this heretical organization. We're going to make a better world. But Pope Francis gave us the language for why they do this, and it's synodality, dialogue and communion, journeying together, telling us that all these other religions are unique pathways to God. We had Pope Leo recently publicly tell us that no one possesses the truth. That's a rejection of the faith itself. Every Catholic has the truth. The Catholic Church has the truth. It does. Full stop. Otherwise, what's the point of being Catholic? And in this story, this bishop is too cowardly to tell those who profess to be pastors for Jesus Christ that they are leading themselves and the souls that they guide, in this case at that wedding, to eternal condemnation. That their actions are leading souls right into the hands of the devil. That people who need to hear the gospel call for repentance and conversion are being denied it. Instead, they're being aided in committing sacrilege and in marching down to the Pied Piper's piping, leading right into the sulfurous pits. And the bishop is aiding them because he is saying nothing. He distanced himself from an organization that he has worked closely with in Germany, because the bishops there in Germany do. They work closely with the separated brethren. Part of it, I'm sure, has to do with the church's relationship to the secular state in Germany. The way the Catholic Church and the major Protestant groups are all controlled in Germany is through the tithing tax. If you are a member of the church and you wish to receive sacraments, you have to pay the tithe. But you don't pay it to the church. Maybe they do second collections in church or something, probably for building funds and that kind of stuff. But your main tithe is a tax levied upon you at 10% and given to the organization you profess to be part of. And it's done by the government. And then that government gives the money to the churches. Think about that for a moment. That is such a bizarre way to do this. But it's the mechanism the government uses to control the churches. And the outcome of this is that the bishops won't dare speak up against other recognized churches. So instead, they ally themselves in the name of synodal dialogue and encounter to work with them, creating a better world. And what ends up happening? There's some pastorette, some priestess for a Protestant group that has so far gone off the deep end that Protestants who actually have faith in Jesus Christ would look at them and go, I don't want anything to do with that group. Though that's how bad it is there. Protestants of goodwill will have the attitude towards that pastoress that people who watch channels like this would have towards James Martin. They would. And instead, the bishops are too afraid to act. That is undeniable. So they have to just quietly distance themselves from the whole thing because these are their friends, their allies. Deep down inside, enough of these bishops know that there's something rotten in all of this, but they can't do anything about it because Rome will not give them any leadership on this. Instead, Rome will applaud this or silently approve. And instead, they'll go after and silence good bishops, good priests who dare to speak the truth, who actually have the Catholic faith. Because this entire mess right here is a reflection of the state of the new synodal church. The false church of probably prophecy. The ape of the church, as Fulton Sheen called it. Orbis says, how can the government demand a tithe to go to church? Well, that's just how it is in Germany. Diane says, how much does the state keep for itself? I don't know. I don't think they do. Maybe they put it in some investment mechanism and gain a little bit of interest, but beyond that, they don't. They have a weird relationship there. Just let me know what you think of this in the comments. Please pray for all of these people and that the church in Germany comes to its senses before it's too late. These kinds of stories, I tell them to you so you will pray for these people. They need to save their souls. And your best tool for that is praying and fasting. And there are Ember Days coming. The season of Advent is coming. Advent, for those of you who don't know, was actually a season of sort of like joyful penance, joyful preparation for the birth of our Lord. It's a season of fasting. It was like a lighter version of Lent, complete with fasting and abstinence on Christmas Eve. Many of you knew that. Gone out the window since Vatican II, although in some cultures the practices are still there. In places like Italy and some others, you'll see still some practices there ingrained in the culture. But for the most part, most of us don't know this stuff. Taken from us. This is your opportunity to do acts of penance for those that I've talked about today. Went off on a bit of a tangent, but that just sometimes happens. Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Please pray for everybody, and as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.